Good afternoon and welcome back to day one of TheGrill 2020. I'm Ross Garner, Senior Vice President of Entertainment at NFP, and we're proud to be a sponsor of this year's Producers Roundtable. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our company, including our focus on film and television production. NFP is one of the largest insurance brokers in the world with over 5,000 employees and 300 offices. What sets us apart from our competitors is NFP's commitment to specialty practices, where most of our brokers focus on a single industry or coverage type. Some of NFP areas of specialization include real estate, life sciences, aviation, and my group, sports and entertainment. Working with Emmy, Oscar, and Grammy winners, concert and event promoters, and all major sports leagues, NFP's sports and entertainment specialty practice has unrivaled knowledge and expertise that helps us craft customized solutions for each of our clients, often using products not available to our competitors. Our team has ensured film projects of all sizes on every continent and found new and unique ways to cover a myriad of logistical and artistic challenges. We appreciate the opportunity to participate in the Grill and hope you enjoy today's Producers Roundtable discussion on filmmaking in the new era. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ross, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to the Producers Roundtable. My name is Mark Ryder. I'm Head of Innovation at NFP.
And I'm Sharon Waxman, stepping in for Don Porter, who is having some technical difficulties, but we didn't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. We've got a fantastic group of producers joining us today. So if Dawn we can figure out her glitches, she will be joining us during the panel, but we wanted to get it started. Welcome.
Awesome. So we have one piece of housekeeping before we get started today. During the discussion, we certainly want to encourage participation from everybody out there at home. So if during the conversations you have a question for the roundtable, please use the comments section in the upper right hand corner of the screen, and the TheWrap team will post those questions as we go forward, and we'll be able to present them to the speakers. So let's bring out the roundtable, Sharon.
Okay, so I'm just going to introduce a few of our amazing producers. Linda Berman, the head of scripted at Lincoln Square Productions at ABC. She most recently produced Lifetime's Stolen by My Mother, starring Niecy Nash. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
Lily Burns is a founding member of Jax Media. She served as executive producer on Broad City, Russian Doll, Emily in Paris, and Search Party. Welcome to you, Lily.
Hi.
And Dominique Butler is the assistant VP of entertainment. Some of her, I don't have the name of your company, but Dominique, help me out.
NFP.
NFP. Oh, at NFP, of course. Thank you. She is the executive, some of her many successes have been ensuring the 2017 winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture. Welcome, Dominique.
Thank you.
Awesome. And to continue with our roundtable, we have John Sloss. John is a principal at Cinetic Media. His credits include Green Book and has handled the sale of over 600 films, including Knock Down the House and Little Miss Sunshine. How you doing, John?
Quite well. Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Oh, I see everybody's got their grill buttons. I'm so happy. Go ahead. Sorry, John.
Andrew Sugarman. Andrew is a former EVP at Disney and currently the co-founder of Invisible Narratives, whose film Songbird was one of the first films to go back into production during the shutdown. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here.
And finally, Tim Zajeros, a producer and co-founder of Armory Films. His credits include D. Reese's Mudbound, as well as The Peanut Butter Falcon. Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Tim, you got to unmute. Lower left. There you go.
Thank you for having me.
So welcome, everyone. And before we get started today, I wanted to set the stage for the discussion. In my role as head of innovation at NFP, I spent the last 4 or 5 years working with our business and corporate customers of ours, encouraging them to rethink the way that they do business, to innovate. And up until the pandemic recently, to innovate was looked at something that everybody knew they needed to do, but it wasn't necessarily number one on their list. It's hard to make change. But now, as a result of the pandemic, we all need to innovate, and we need to rethink what we do in our personal lives and our business lives. And it's more of a mandate as opposed to an option. And every industry is dealing with this, and the entertainment industry is no different. So today, we want to unpack some of that. there's a ton of different things that need to be addressed in the new norm, the new filmmaking era, have you. From tactical steps, such as just returning and getting back onto the set, to creative aspects of the business, crafting scripts that are realistic in the new norm. So today, over the next hour, we're going to try to unpack some of those. And we thought we would first start off with the tactical, because that's kind of I guess the more boring part, you'd say. It's the stuff that we do at NFP from an insurance and risk management perspective, and then we'll dive into the creative. So in the lab, I was mentioning the work that we do is to really look for new solutions that help people improve or solve for big problems. And one of the big problems that our employer groups that we work with and have been struggling with is getting back to work physically. How to create a safe environment for their employees, for their customers. And it seems to me that that's something that probably resonates within the entertainment industry as well, as you're going back to production set and trying to get underway. So we've seen a lot of technology come into play that has helped with assessing people's health before they come on board into an organization or into a building, to monitoring the health of those workers or those visitors, to testing and getting test kits out to and from, and making sure that before work begins, there's the things that are addressed. So I wanted to pose this question to the panel, and maybe Andrew, knowing from what we just read there that you were hot and heavy within production during the pandemic. I mean, we're still in essence in there, but can you talk a little bit maybe about the challenges that you faced, and maybe how you worked through that, and then maybe we can open up. I know, Linda, you're in quarantine, so maybe we can talk about that. Maybe you have something to add as well.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in and get this started. We were very excited at Invisible Narratives to do exactly what you said, is getting people back to work, opening up the industry, and bringing what we can to Hollywood here in Los Angeles. And so with Songbird, we really work closely with the guilds and following state, local, every guideline that we could find in regards to how to do this safely. And really it is broken down into three broad areas. One was on the testing front, and how to really ensure that we had the testing regimen in place to ensure a safe and enclosed environment. The second is on the breaking the shoot down into zones. So we had an A, a B, and a C zone, where we separated the types of cast and crew between those three zones to reduce sort of the cross-contamination risks. And then the third was just on the footprint of the shoot itself, that we had sort of being independent and agile. We worked with a crew that was 30 to 40 people, which is very different than sort of the major studios with hundreds of people on a shoot, which was a much more containable and controllable environment.
Not to dig into the weeds there, but were you successful? Was there any issues that arose with any health issues that you had to, I guess, triage during it with those zones? I think it was a pretty cool approach that you took there. Did you have any issues arise?
I am very happy to say that we did not. That I'd say that all of the processes that were put in place really ensured that the environment was safe, and we made it all the way through the shoot without any incident.
That's awesome.
Right.
And really, I'd say it's a testament also to our partners on the production side, Catchlight Studios.
Great. That's awesome. That's awesome. Linda, maybe you might want to, I know that we exchanged some emails and you said you were en route to quarantine. So maybe you can talk about a little bit about what you're going through.
Day 3 of quarantine. So when you come to Vancouver, it's not easy to get in. You have to either be an essential worker or have a life and death, reason for coming. I actually almost didn't get on the plane in LA because they said I needed a letter from the consulate, which we didn't have, but it all worked out and I'm here. And when you get here, anyone from the US has to quarantine for 2 weeks, and they are serious about it. It's $1 million fine and or 6 months in jail, and they can kick you out of the country for a year. When you get here, they give you the one-use key for your apartment or hotel, and you cannot come out for 2 weeks. So it's a lot of deliveries. But it's, it's working for them. And Canada has very low level of incidents and deaths right now, and they want to keep it that way. So we will not be testing on the set unless someone has symptoms, because the British Columbia health professionals and health officers, which will be on set, that's their mandate. You only test if someone has any kind of symptoms, but temperatures will be checked every day. Anyone with a symptom will be removed immediately and tested. And then if there's any positive results, then everyone will get tested. But they've been shooting up here since July, and I haven't heard of any problems. Same, as Andrew was saying, there are lots of wash stations. Everything's cleaned continually. There's prepackaged food. It's an interesting thing because it's, it kind of changes the social atmosphere of a set. In a way, I don't know what the result's going to be yet, but you don't congregate at lunchtime, and you don't sit next to your, all the people you want to sit next to and watch the movie or stand next to them. Even the video village is different. I think the DP and the DIT, if you have one, or director and scripty are at another location. I'll probably be at a different camera. So I guess the only good thing about all of this quarantine stuff is it's reducing the use of paper. There's no call sheets, it's all digital scripts, very few sides on the set. So maybe there's a little bit of a benefit to what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
What is the show you're on?
The show is Mahalia, and it's a Lifetime movie about Mahalia Jackson. And it is, I'm producing it with Robin Roberts. It's her second movie. The first one we did was the Kamaya movie in January.
Great.
And it's Kenny Leon directing and Daniel Brooks starring. So really excited about it.
Awesome.
That's very
Yeah. I mean, I think the move towards digital, we're seeing it in our business. The insurance business is a very paper-based business, and that's no longer feasible. So you need to digitize and share things electronically, and that is definitely the new norm. Before we move on to the next topic, any of our panelists have anything to add to that? Any experiences they've had thus far?
Yeah. We have at Jax Media about 5 shows, maybe 6 shows shooting right now. 4 of those are late night shows. So they're contained, it's essentially a person or 2 people at a desk talking. And so from a production standpoint, that's pretty doable. We have a lot of the same precautions that everyone is kind of talking about, different zones and frequent testing. People that are on set will get tested 3 times a week. And everyone sort of maintains zones, and obviously a lot of PPE and stuff like that. We're also starting to begin to shoot, and in week 5 of shooting, some narrative stage shows. So those are also working in the same way. The cast isn't quarantined. They're just sort of abiding by a social contract to, just go home afterwards. But so far, no incidences and a lot of testing. One of those shows is The Connors, which we're shooting in LA, and we shot another stage show, a reality competition show, also in LA.
Awesome. Well, it's good to hear. There's been no incidents across the country. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Mark, two other call outs just from our experience as like watch areas. And one is the risk of just humans falling back into their normal behavior, right. Which we have all these protocols and all these things in place, but it's exhausting staying on top of everything, and humans have a propensity to slide back into what it is that they've done before the pandemic on a shoot. And so it's being very mindful of that risk. And then the second is wearing masks. It's very difficult to know human expression when you're wearing a mask and you're trying to capture what's happening between the DP and the cast. So it's very much a challenge and very physically grueling with the mask element on set.
It's a That's a great point. And it's interesting, you actually teed up the next topic that I wanted to pose to the roundtable. Despite the testing and despite the protocol you put in place, and despite the zoning, it's inevitable that there is going to be productions that are going to be shut down or delayed due to illness, right? It's going to happen somewhere. And, there's large financial commitments that are made to actors, actresses, production companies, et cetera, are putting a lot of dollars into it. So when you think about not just setting the precautions, but then also trying to ensure the production, I know that there's insurance companies, and I'm going to ask Dominique to talk a little bit about what we're doing, because insurance companies have innovated. They've come to the table with new solutions to help safeguard against financial loss. And curious as to when you're budgeting for the film, how much you're taking that into consideration and how much that's really impacting production. So Dominique, maybe you want to talk to us a little bit about that, and that'll open up some conversation as well.
Okay, so as of right now with the whole shutdown, majority, if not all of our production insurance carriers have basically excluded cast coverage related to COVID-related shutdowns or sickness, civil authority, imminent peril coverages, and any new productions that were submitted immediately after the shutdown, or any blanket wrap-up policies that had that coverage in it that came up for renewal after essentially June 1st, those coverages were removed and they went away. Since then, we've had several different options, 2 options actually right now, as far as a pandemic buyback policy or option. And it basically allows for production companies to buy back the cast coverage related to COVID-related shutdowns or exposures, civil authority coverage, and imminent peril coverage as a standalone option to the exclusions that are now being found in production insurance policies. Premium-wise or rate-wise, it's not cheap. It's not for everyone. It's not for each and every production, but at least it is an option as far as an opportunity to buy back some of that coverage so that production can continue to move forward and create new content. Us at NFP, we've also come up with some additional other creative options, either by way of a life insurance product or some type of other standalone, not traditional product to help with production. But basically right now, that's where we are within the industry, minus a federal backstop to help bail out our standard insurance.
Interesting. I mean, around that topic, yeah, John, maybe you can speak. Is that impacting even the planning for what you're doing moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because when people sort of recovered from the shock of the quarantine and the pandemic, they rightly focused on all the protocols that would enable people to stay safe in production, and there wasn't a lot of emphasis on insurance. And unless you're a self-insuring entity like Netflix or the studios or whomever, it was going to be in many cases, an unacceptable risk for financiers. So, as someone who advises financiers and advises, people up and down the chain of production, I started doing some research and I came across PREA, this federal backstop that I think Dominique alluded to, and I don't know where it is in terms of in Congress right now. It seems to me that a lot of productions are just not going to be able to be up and running again without some kind of federal backstop. And I'm interested to know, I guess over at NFP from you or Dominique, what you guys think about the idea of this backstop and whether you consider it a positive and where it is.
Dominique, I'm going to put
well,
that on
as of right now, it hasn't gained a lot of traction. It's slowly making its way through. It has been introduced. There has been some modifications or changes made to the bill so far. But as of right now, it's still not a definite, not a go. And even within the bill itself, At one point, there was talks or suggestions about maybe some possible backdating to allow for some sort of recovery for certain production companies and other businesses impacted by the COVID shutdown. But as of right now, even if passed, it would be a look forward type coverage where it wouldn't even look to take effect until January 1st of 2021. So as far as an immediate fill or need or solution to the problem right now, it is limited to the couple of options that we have available for the pandemic buyback coverage.
Anybody else running into these challenges or have experienced this yet that has kind of, I guess, forced your hand to move forward or not move forward with any projects? Not today.
I will.
No, go
I
ahead,
will
Linda.
say. I will say that there's, besides just the COVID costs of insurance and the extra days that you generally have to put into your budget because of a slower schedule. For us at least, there's the quarantining. So that's another 2 weeks of putting actors up if they're coming from outside of Canada. So it starts to add up quite a bit. And what we've done is kind of taken the COVID costs and put them outside of the budget so that we can determine the difference between what we're really spending on the show as opposed to what we're spending because of the conditions.
I'm curious also to ask, what's the difference between, say, Linda's working on a studio production, which versus more independent works that, say, Tim or John tend to work on? Is it? I would think it's in some ways scarier to try to get independent production going because of the risks, whereas perhaps the studio feels like they've got more clout in absorbing what those risks are.
I mean, what I would say is, there are inherent cost increases of the pandemic, and if one of the, there's an issue of whether it's an acceptable risk to go into production where you may get shut down and delayed or have to just shut down production. And like I said, the larger the studios can make a decision. They often make decisions about self-insurance anyway and bonding. Independents often don't have that luxury, but they do. But everyone's accepting that there's going to be an embedded cost increase. And I guess if insurance is available, if the premiums are higher, if the deductibles are higher, then that's just another cost increase to take into effect. I'd be interested. I don't know if Dominique, if you want to talk specifically about if you feel like you can't proceed with production without a full production insurance package, what those actual increased costs they'll be looking at.
Now, are you referring to basically like taking out a buyback policy, a standalone, where you have to pick up the additional cast coverage related to COVID-related exposures, civil authority, and imminent peril? If we're looking at that, typically that right now is averaging about 10% of the overall limit. So if we're looking at you're purchasing $1 million limit to be split between those three coverages, it's roughly $100,000 in premium. I've quoted it, and we've bound a few policies. For the much smaller independent production companies, it's not always an easy pill to swallow, that high of a cost, but we've also looked at ways of maybe packaging or bundling it and spreading it out over the course of several features that they are projects that they have coming up within the next 6 to 12 months. So we have been trying to be as creative as we can with the approach with what's available in the marketplace right now.
Tim, can you comment also on the independent thing? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because, to John's point, the insurance premiums and the increase, it's something that you need. I mean, I guess it depends on the budget. to some degree. You know, if it's a smaller movie, maybe you're willing to roll the dice, but is that a fiscally responsible move? Not really. So yeah, we're in tricky times. We're kind of right now, which is not something that we used to do before, but oftentimes when we have a project, we're just moving forward, and then if we have a partner, we have a partner. But now we're more looking for those studio partners or those streamers to partner with on a production ahead of time, because they will take those chances. They will insure essentially themselves and bond it themselves. And that's a risk we prefer to put on somebody else rather than ourselves, because it's a big risk for independent financiers, and it's not even something to a large degree, I don't even feel comfortable asking them to accept.
Yeah.
I just want to point out one thing, Mark, before we pop back to, which is that we had a series very early in the pandemic, in the quarantine. We had a series of conversations we called a survival guide. John was on on one of those conversations when we started out, just trying to figure out what the heck was going on and what it might mean, and one was for producers. And at that time, and I want to say it was probably April, you know, there was no perspective on being able to resume production. So we've actually, just want to point out that there has been some progress made. I know it just feels probably really frustrating and really hard to make decisions, and producers have to make a million decisions a day. But there is, I mean, I'm really actually encouraged to hear all of you producers who are producing, even if maybe some of you aren't in production right this minute, but some of you are. I'm impressed. I just want to say I'm impressed. John,
yeah, no, awesome. I think it's a testament to figuring out how, like making the way, and that actually transitions pretty nicely. And I'm going to flip it over to you, Sharon, to get a little bit lead the discussion around the creative. So we talked about the tactical. Let's say at the end of the day, we can set up the protocol that keeps everybody as safe as possible. We can limit our exposure, and we either have a partner, or we've somehow been able to secure some coverages to cover our financial exposure. There's a whole nother set of things that are having to be dealt with around the creative, around how to, creating content and what to think about. Maybe Sharon, you can lead some of that discussion, as I'm more the tactical, and you being in the industry are more the creative.
Yeah, well, happy to ask questions of, I think some of the kind of nuts and bolts of getting a production going. Linda, you're probably dealing with this right now. I'm not clear. You're probably not shooting, because it sounds like you're still.
We're in prep, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. But we did a whole series about this on TheWrap, which is like, are you going to be able to get actors to play intimate scenes, for example? Are you going to be able to do hand-to-hand combat scenes? I don't think Mahalia maybe has hand-to-hand combat, but lots and lots of movies do. So I guess, one question would just be, how are you maneuvering with some of the artistic sides of storytelling that require us not to be in little boxes when we're trying to tell a story?
Yeah, and it's not even it is the hand-to-hand kind of closeness of people, but it's also, Mahalia Jackson sang all over the world to huge audiences, and we can't do that. So we are going to try and figure out a way to do Carnegie Hall and do the Newport Jazz Festival with CGI and tiles, and try and shoot more at her than the audience. And there's all kinds of things that we have to think about when you go through the script and say, well, no, we can't do something with 1,000 extras or 200 extras. Let's figure out how to do a different scene with 10 extras.
So you're rewriting scenes then? Absolutely.
Yeah. We have been, since it kind of, since we got Danielle Brooks on board, we started doing that and working with Kenny, the director, to figure out different ways to shoot it so that we get the feel of the breadth of the story, but without having to film it.
Anybody else want to jump in on sort of the?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. We had the good fortune of our script allowed us to take into consideration the situation that we were in, because our Songbird was essentially a film set during the pandemic. So, as we wrote, we were writing the script and in pre-production at the same time. This was in March and April, and really at the peak of the lockdown, the script really reflects that isolation and that sense of being alone, and how to reflect that in society and the impact that has. So I would say for that film, it was written to take into consideration a film about a pandemic during a pandemic.
There may be a whole lot of movies like that coming out, something tells me, but you were going to say something.
It's not only that. I mean, there's the issue of the pandemic and how that sort of weighs on the collective psyche. But obviously, during this time, there's the whole social justice issue that has moved to the fore, and I think has changed many people's thinking, and certainly within the industry has changed even during the pandemic. The way people are approaching different stories and cultural appropriation and things like that, so that when we come out of this and we're back at it producing, I think there's going to be a lot of different thinking. And as you know, Sharon, I spend a lot of time selling completed films, and so there's the issue of film festivals that aren't occurring, and how you sell a film. But there are also films that seem that they would have been very relevant, and they would have been, we understood how to sell them, that in this environment, even with the demand of all the streamers, is not smart to bring films on certain topics to the market. So it's incredible how much it's going to take on board at this point, and how much is changing.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I want to circle back to Lily. I thought you were going to comment on the creative.
Yeah. I think our approach, there are definite ways to approach our scripts the same way we always would before production, just sort of like how to get them in budget, how to make things smaller, how to make cuts and trims to a certain extent to make it doable. I think the cast thing is sort of like, I think you need to just make a system where you can commit to your cast being able to fully interact. Otherwise, I think it's going to be tough to make, content that feels relevant and real. But I think at least our approach with our bigger narrative shows is that, we'll make sort of some concessions and changes, and obviously stuff with huge crowds would need to be rethought, but that if the rules of the pandemic will sort of limit creative to an extreme, then we'll just wait on that show. Like, I think there's a certain amount of concessions that creative can withstand, and then a certain amount that just make it worth waiting this out. And I know that's a pretty big question mark, but we definitely feel like some stuff can't be sort of like cut and trimmed and shaped completely.
Do you mind telling us what are the shows? Because I believe you said you had 5 shows in production. Or
yeah, sure. So we have Diza Samero, which is a late night show on Showtime, which is sort of has switched over to Zoom, and given the kind of nature of that show, is functioning very well in the Zoom world. Full Frontal with Samantha Bee is another late night show. That's just something that we're able to shoot kind of like lo-fi, but again, it's just a person talking to camera, so very functional.
In her backyard with her husband behind the camera.
Correct.
So,
correct. So, those are those are shows that like lend themselves to being able to sort of adapt under those conditions. We have bigger shows, like doing. We're about to go into production on Younger, which is a Darren Star show. It's like a glitzy New York show, big parties, stuff like that. And we're going to start shooting in a few weeks, and we'll start with the majority of the stage work and sort of like hope that things get better as we move towards production, But with a show like that, we couldn't possibly, contain it to such an extreme that the way you could with a Sam B. So with other shows on the sort of level of that, like a Russian Doll season 2, that show is sort of like worth waiting for creatively. And so we wouldn't kind of like go all the way to make it happen, this fall, no matter what. I think some stuff sort of lends itself to being able to endure those changes, and other things don't.
It's interesting to look at ABC, because my company is part of ABC, Lincoln Square Productions. It's I've seen how the news teams had to continue doing this from the start. You can't not do the news every day, and so they went into their basements. Some of the anchors, and it's just necessity breeds invention, and we all figure out how to do these things in a different way. And I don't know that we're going to get back to a normal. We're going to have a new normal, and we're all going to have to kind of pivot in different ways to figure out what the next steps are for being creative in this environment.
I would say we're shooting a multicam, and it basically is able to function creatively exactly as it would have. So that's a format that lends itself to these sorts of rules.
That's interesting. John, do you have anything in production right now?
I got a lot of docs in production right now, which is a area that really seems to have, it's clear that the pipeline has slowed down, but there are a lot of docs that are going ahead. And I think as a result of this, I'm speculating, but you have to assume that if production effectively shuts down on scripted stuff for 6 months or a year and docs keep going, that the trajectory that documentaries are enjoying of becoming more valuable and more watched is only going to continue and rise. In terms of a couple films we're producing, we went and did some reshoots, but we have not, and we're doing tons of obviously development work, but we have not gone into production on any full-scale films since the pandemic.
Mark, do you have any other thoughts before we turn to some questions? I think we keep losing Andrew, but it looks like he's finding his way back.
Yeah, it might have been Andrew who had said that focus more on new media and looking at streaming and the merging between. And I spoke to my children about it because they're very much in the gaming world and kind of the bringing that. I think that's in line with your company and the production, Invincible. Are companies looking to just shift out of what they used to do and producing like certain type of movies and say we're going to go into a whole new space because we think that's what the future is? Is this that tipping point to move folks out of just standard production? I'm curious about that. Although Andrew, I picked the wrong guy because he keeps he froze on me. That was the wrong pick.
You might be having connectivity challenges, but yeah.
Looks like they have a question. We can probably fill the space if he comes back and contribute. Great. If not, we can keep going with the questions that are coming in.
I think we have a question from Chip Ross. Given that films have always had to adapt to changing times, how do you see the long-term changes to production from COVID? Yeah, good question. Just kind of a theme we've been hearing all day, which is like, whatever happens when we come out of this period, things are never going back to the way they were. That's sort of been hearing that all day from people.
I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought I was just gonna say you were muted. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I think that one thing that people will start to learn more, and that I think a lot of those of you that sort of make independent films know already, which is that you can do a lot with a little, and that the sort of gigantic needs of some of the bigger films may not be entirely necessary to deliver a similar product. So I wonder if the sort of like lessons learned in terms of like reducing crew and reducing the footprint might be something that will be carried on long after we don't have to sort of observe these rules.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, outside of production, but to take that into other industry, I mean, I think it's a similar concept of what you think of corporate America and people working remote now. The reality of them going back to a similar footprint from an office space perspective is probably unlikely. Huge expense, you can cut that expense in half, perhaps. And we've just proven out in a live use case that we can survive and thrive in some areas. So I think along those same lines, coming out of this, I would imagine, although maybe some of the risks will be down if a vaccine comes out, there still needs to be those safeguards against what's in the future and the things that you've learned during this. Removing paper, for instance. I mean, do we decide, let's go back and print a ton more, or probably not? I would think.
That's true. And also, I remember when we talked last time and had a producer's survival guide, John and others were talking about it being kind of a boon time if you were selling. That you could, that there's a lot of demand, and other production was kind of paralyzed. I see Lily nodding. That's going to go on for some time. Do you guys think?
I think so. And one thing that I think will come out of this, it's not production, but it's interesting. I think this is finally going to accelerate the collapsing of windows. I think if theaters are going to come back, I know this is not our topic, and hopefully they will, and hopefully we'll all band together to support them and get them back. I think the quid pro quo is going to be the idea that the ability of films to be flexible and to shift onto the platforms, quickly after being in theaters is going to be the new reality.
Or simultaneously, perhaps.
Well, but yeah, it's a slightly different value proposition, but yes.
But if I could jump on what John's saying, I do agree that the collapsing of windows, but I also think there's going to be alternative forms of distribution that do begin to appear during this time. So, for example, last week, Invisible Narratives, we launched our own PVOD on how we're going to distribute a film that we just completed, which is called Crimson, directed by Gregory Plotkin, who did Paranormal Activity. And with that, we can combine content with merchandise and bring that to a Gen Z audience in a completely new way. And that audience is consuming content in just massive amounts. And that's only increased during the pandemic. So I think there's going to be a lot of behavioral shifts that are going to happen as a result of this. And those are going to be permanent. Those aren't going to be here for a few months. So I think that you've probably seen 5 years accelerated down into 5 months.
Oof. Wow.
I tell you, that's actually funny. That's a phrase that I use quite a bit. That the buying habits, even in our space, have I had said 7 years and 7 weeks, 5 and 5. It's the same thing, but people have advanced significantly in the way they're going to consume in your area and the way they're buying products for sure. I'm glad you came back on and you kind of hit on the question I had before I lost you.
I apologize. My Wi-Fi keeps cutting
okay.
out.
No, that happens. That's the new normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark, you can read those questions.
Yeah, we have another question here. Given the fact that COVID-19 isn't going away, does this force you to shift the way in which you select future projects? Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I actually don't want to think that I want to be more optimistic and think that while it won't necessarily go away, it is going to get better. I don't think that while it's for us, we're definitely picking projects that are more COVID friendly, smaller casts, smaller sets, so on and so forth, just because that is the time right now. But I do think that, in a year or two, hopefully less than that, I think that we will be able to go back to making productions with large crowds and bigger set pieces.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it's necessarily going to impact the choices you guys are making. I mean,
Well, I for one hope you get back to that. I'm one with Tim there saying let's hope for the best, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it will depend though on the distribution platform, doesn't it? I keep wanting to make a not funny joke about the TikTok movie, but where Hollywood makes its bread and butter is on the blockbusters, on the big, at least from the movie side. On television, there's a much broader range, of course, but those are the ones that strike me as really, really challenging to do right now.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
It's impossible.
I don't know.
I would agree with that. But
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say that the analogy with the TikTok film, I think that overlap of the world of YouTube and TikTok, and the amount of consumption that's happening on those platforms is just staggering. And as traditionals challenged, I do think that there's going to be more of this coming together of the digital world and the traditional Hollywood world. And we've leaned very much into that, where there's already massive fandoms that are gathering around a lot of these individuals that rather than having to go out and build audiences, you can just engage those audiences. And that's exactly what we did on this recent project that was done in partnership with esports, probably one of the largest esports lifestyle brands in the world, which is called FaZe Clan, where they have 200 million, an audience of 200 million that is active and engaged on these platforms every day of the week. So I think that is going to be a shift and a change that's going to continue as the strength of digital and these platforms grows over the past 5 months and the next probably five to whatever number of months this continues to go on.
I will say though that blockbusters, I mean, this is my observation based on zero data, that it sort of feels like the things that are shooting are kind of the really small contained things, and then the huge blockbusters. Like the rules of COVID you can buy your way out of them, which is to say that like if you can quarantine everybody in a hotel and you can afford the Mandalorian thing, backdrop thing, whatever that's called, and you can sort of do all of that stuff, then you really can, because like we know that things like Jurassic Park and Mission Impossible and that Batman, like all of those things are shooting. So I think it's almost like only the super massive, projects that can buy their way out of it, and then the really small contained stuff at this time is what's going in terms of movies.
I think that's exactly right. Just to sort of get back to our sponsors here, it's so much of it is about insurance, and it's not an issue for the studios or for the blockbusters who can throw money at it, but you can absolutely, to a great extent, buy your way out of COVID, and those productions are going to continue. The real issue is what's going to happen when they're done and the theaters haven't opened. What's going to happen to Bond? Are they gonna break down and sell the James Bond to Netflix for $300 million, or are they going to wait? To me, these are the real questions, not the production of these films. Well,
and further to that too, I mean, the studios essentially their model is just tentpole and tiny movies. Is that strategy even going to remain anymore? I mean, to spend $200 million on a movie and then $300 million on marketing for theaters that are, not obviously attracting a lot of people, it's hard to make sense of that.
No, I mean, what may happen is if they spend $200 million on the movie, they save the $300 million on the marketing,
right? And
they just put it on the platform, or they put it on PVOD at $19.99 with much less marketing, and their P&Ls start to look a lot better, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's what everyone's testing right now, is to see exactly that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
how the PVOD plays out.
I mean, one thing, this is sort of related, not entirely, but I always like to bring this up. It's like in France, it is not allowed to advertise movies on television. So the P&A costs in France are a fraction of what they are in the United States. And the question is, if you look at the economics of the French movie business or of the movie industry, the entertainment industry in France, you get a very eye-opening result there, or at least so. It
cuts out the lion's share of what a normal marketing spend would be in this country.
Yeah.
A lot of movies.
And it's all, but the Tom Bernard, as much as I hate to credit him, raises this point all the time. It's like every, the media platforms bank on the fact that the noise has been raised so much that you have to spend so much money to distinguish yourself above the noise. But if all the noise was brought down, the economics of the industry would be a lot more interesting. And that's kind of what they did in France.
I have to say that makes me kind of sad to know that those are the two poles of production now, because I did have like a secret hope that sort of character-based interior dramas might make a comeback during COVID, because you could make a character-based movie with a few people, which I guess is the equivalent of an indie film these days, but they used to be actually in theaters. Those of you who lived through the glory days of the 70s or some of the 90s might remember. But do we have time for one more question, Mark? What do you think? Or I'm getting a wrap up.
It looks like we have one more question coming in here.
Yeah, I'm sure we have more than one, but let's just take this one.
Yeah. Have there been major changes in who has leverage in acquisition and distribution negotiations?
Thanks.
Max Rissman, an estimable young filmmaker who I happen to know, asked that question. And a smart question it is. It's funny. We at Cinetic have about 40 completed films that we have not taken to the market.
Wow.
And
interesting.
It was very intentional. And basically, we did the mathematical or logical calculation that if Netflix has a content budget in 2020 of $19 billion, and there are 5 or 6 platforms chasing them, and then production basically ceases for a year or something for all intents and purposes, something would have to give, and that it's sad that the theatrical distributors are going through a hard time and the theaters are not functioning. But if you really put that aside and you think about the content suppliers and the platforms, you would think that the leverage would shift and become a seller's market. In our experience, that has not really happened yet. We're waiting for the platforms to cry uncle, and they have not really done that. But I think if this extends out, and it will, because production, even as it begins and these heroic efforts are made, is still going to be a fraction of what it was. That you have to assume that if you are able to have quality content or content that people want, you'll be in a very good position.
It's a pretty big bet you made on COVID there, John.
Hey, I say, let's roll the dice.
I think we're out of time, but I found this a really fascinating conversation. Thank you to all the producers. You guys have taken time out of your super busy schedules to participate and talk to the larger community about how you're working through this really challenging period. Mark?
Yeah, it was awesome. I want to thank everybody for joining us, the panelists, a lot of great dialogue, and looks like, I think in signing off, we'll see you tomorrow, a spotlight conversation, I believe, with Miranda July. And
it'll be me with Miranda.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you, everybody. And best of luck as we continue to try to figure a new way in this new norm.